This is Silas Grant, and I am back with another installment of How Should I Introduce You? This particular installment includes two great people that I know that I felt needed to at least be introduced to one another. Two friends of mine, Erick King and Jamar Hudson. As I normally do, I ask the folks that are invited on the installments to provide me with a brief bio that I can read. How people are introduced is really, really important to me. And I think that people deserve to be introduced the way they want to be introduced. And so I asked the both of them to send me some stuff on them that I could use as an introduction, and we'll go from there. So I'll start with Erick King. Erick is a social entrepreneur, an investor, and an advisor with a focus on inclusive community development. With 19 years of experience in juvenile justice, affordable housing, and nonprofit leadership, Mr. King is a leader in sustainable, inclusive growth with the National Capital Region. Mr. King is the co-founder and executive director of Capital Youth Empowerment Program, also known as CYEP. It provides a variety of social and economic empowerment programs, including fatherhood, workforce development, STEM, and teen sexual health. His unique approach of using evidence-based programming and culturally competent staff was shaped by his work with Fairfax County and Arlington County Court Services units. In addition, Mr. King recently founded King Consulting and Development Group, Inc., to support diversity and inclusion within university and corporate environments. In addition, Mr. King is an active Virginia Tech alumnus, serving on the Apex Systems Center for Entrepreneurship Board of Advisors, the Honors College Calhoun Discovery Program as a distinguished guest lecturer, and as a member of the Black Alumni Association, the UT Prosem awardee in 2018. He's earned degrees in sociology as well as political science at Virginia Polytechnic Institute in 2000. So that is Erick King. Erick, welcome to How Should I Introduce You?
Thank you.
All right, good stuff, good stuff. Next up is my Hampton brother, Jamar Hudson, and I'm glad to have him on here as well. And Jamar Hudson is 38 years old, a lover of life, a husband, a father, a runner, a believer. Professionally, he is a veteran communications and media professional with over 15 years of experience. He graduated from Hampton University in 2004, and he got his start in newspapers before moving to ESPN in 2006. He spent 6 years as an editor at ESPN.com. Since 2012, he's worked in strategic communications and public affairs in a variety of capacities in the DC area. He's currently a program manager for a government contracting company, He lives in Temple Hills, Maryland with his wife, Sharice, and his son, Emery. So Jamar, welcome to How Should I Introduce You?
What's going on, my man? Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, no worries, man. I'm glad that you all were able to join. I just wanted to start, Jamar, when I was reading your bio, you mentioned being a believer. And I know that in this time, a lot of us have hope and belief in a variety of things, but could you unpack a bit what you mean when you state that you're a believer?
Yeah, man. Well, again, thanks for having me, Sal. It's good to meet you, Eric. When I say a believer, it's just, my belief, number one, in God. That's, the basis of my faith and, my belief system. Even when things are crazy like they are now, I still have that foundation, that belief that, there's a higher power that's going to get us through all these bad times. I also believe in, in people, in the good in people, people like you, people like Eric seems to be. I'm a believer in life and love and happiness, all those things combined, but it really starts in belief and faith, in God.
Good stuff. Before you jumped on, Eric and I were talking, and Eric and I have been in conversation over the course of the last year or so. And Eric jumped out there on faith and, went full-fledged into consulting on his own. And so, Eric, I know for you, belief and faith is important during this period because your first year, could have easily been marred by COVID-19. But as you mentioned before we started recording, you know, you saw it as an opportunity. So talk about that mindset you had when you jumped out on your own.
Well, I really do think faith is a big part of it. And having that foundation that, you know, you have everything that you need. God has given you all the talents and everything you need and all the resources to get the job done and to execute at a high level. And so when he gives you, I think one thing that he's gifted me with is vision. And so once you really have the vision and it aligns with, you know, your purpose and what God put you on this earth for, I think you can lean in and be confident that no matter what the circumstances are, COVID, no COVID, you're walking in the right path. You're living out your purpose, and you could just go at it, and everything just seems to come together. So I totally live my life by faith, and think it's a real key to success. I mean, if you have the vision and actually have that plan of action, it's just about getting the job done. So I'm totally a believer in that.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny, you know, I look at the three of us, and you know, the three of us have families, and you know, our duration in this space as you know members of our families, it varies, right? But at the same time, there's a lot of balance that comes into play with respect to you know trying to get things done. And I found myself in this period. So my daughter was home with me for about maybe 2 months while I worked from home. And I remember there was a day or a period where it just clicked in like, you know what, you can't make any more excuses. You got to get her on the schedule. You got to walk her in the stroller, get her to go to sleep for a while. You got to knock things out while she sleep. When she gets up, you still got to help her develop. So I really remember vividly it clicking in for me during this period. And, you know, I wrote this affirmation a few months ago, and I won't, you know, share the whole thing, but one of the things that I wrote was that if the best doesn't come out of you, that means it's not in you. And in order to get it in you, you've got to consume things that'll make you better. So during this period, like what have been some things that you all have done specifically to try to develop yourselves or to try to consume things that'll keep you going? Because, you know, obviously this whole worrying about COVID and what's next, it can drive you nuts if you allow it to, right? So what have been some things or some sources of inspiration for you guys?
Well, for me, it's been I've actually grown a whole lot as far as growing companies and things of that nature. I've started really investing in other people, and by investing in other people, opportunities are just opening up. I mean, doors are opening up. And so like early on last year when I transitioned full time to run the Capital Youth Empowerment Program, I met with one of my mentors, and he said the key to business and the key to success isn't taking, it's giving. And so I started to really I bought into it and started to invest and mentor other people. And what was crazy is as I started to pour and mentor into other people, opportunities started to open up. And these same people I was mentoring, we started to do business together, and opportunities started to open up. And like someone's contacts plus an idea I had came together. And I mean, I started a private equity firm, started the consulting group, and then for my wife, she wanted to get into e-commerce. So we started a holding company so that she could start to get her feet wet in that space by selling masks. So it's crazy that, you know, when some folks are distracted by what's going on around them, if you invest in others and your mindset is helping other people, you stay busy and then you start to learn from them. And so it's kind of a theme that I have over the last year and I've embodied is just being a lifelong learner and learning from like investing in people and learning all the time. And that's kept me busy and kept me going this whole year.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the main things I've done in this period, and going back since March, is really prioritizing physical health and fitness, because I have more time being at home all day as opposed to being in the office, and how long it takes to commute to and from work. I've had more time to go on runs during the day, during my lunch break, before and after work, before I drop Emery off at daycare. So that's been a priority of mine. I always was really into running and health and fitness, going to the gym and such. But now I've been able to really prioritize that. I don't have any excuses. I'm at home all day. And I see people, talking about the COVID-15 and that sort of thing. And I didn't want to get into a situation where, I'm sitting at home, I'm working at home, I'm getting lazy, I'm snacking all day. I wanted to prioritize my physical health, and not necessarily for the now, but one of the things I've been going through during this period is my father had major surgery, non-COVID related, but just major surgery, and just seeing him and other men of color, when you get into your 60s and 70s, popping pills and taking insulin, and that in our community has been accepted as the norm. You get to a certain age, this is what's supposed to happen. So I'm looking at that, and I'm thinking to myself, I need to really establish a good foundation health-wise now as I approach 40, so I won't have to be in that situation when I'm 60, when I'm 70, going to the doctor and having all these health issues, when I could establish a good health and fitness regimen now, so that when later I'm not dealing with some of those issues that I see, older Black men in my family and older Black men of friends, fathers of friends, and people I know dealing with those issues at that advanced age. So that's one of the things that I've really been trying to take advantage of this time that I've been at home the last 6-7 months.
Yeah. So both of you all are in the space where you're pushing the advancement of men through fatherhood, and specifically Black men, right? Both of you are in that space. Jamar, you have a podcast where you talk about fatherhood. Obviously, Erick, you have fatherhood programs within CYEP. And Jamar, to your point about setting a foundation for yourself, how do you all think we can spread that word, socialize and normalize the idea of setting that foundation? And I've been curious about this for the last couple of weeks, because a friend of mine, he and I, we walk together once a month, right? We get together, we talk, and we do like a walking meeting. And one of the times in which we walked in the past previous months, he was telling me a story about him having an encounter with a white male who was about 70 years old. And the white male told him, the prime of your life is in your 60s. And as Black men, we don't think that far, right? We think the prime is the 30s and 40s, right? Or even the 20s for some of us. But how do we shift our mindset to say, man, there's more to look forward to? But then more importantly, like, I'm trying to figure out myself, how do we spread that word to other people that look like us, that, man, the best is still yet to come, and we got to get prepared for that?
Well, I think for me, you mentioned the podcast I have, and just to plug it real quick, it's at the Fatherhood Podcast. I've been doing it for approaching 2 years now. Salas has been a guest on my show, and he had a great episode with him. But I think, getting that message out, using that platform to have different discussions that may be relatable to fathers from different, walks of life, whether you are a partnered father, whether you're a married father, whether you're a single father, because it doesn't look the same for everybody. And I think we have an important responsibility to use our various platforms to help each other out wherever you may be in the stage of life. And I'm sorry, I totally forgot your question. I was distracted by trying to get Emery out the way.
No, it was really just about how do we spread that word, because we're doing it individually, right? But how do we normalize it, socialize it? Like, obviously, Jamar, you and I, if COVID were aside, we would have been in Hampton this weekend, right? We would have been tailgating. We would have been talking.
Yes.
How do we merge that push to grow and to develop physically how do we normalize that in our tailgate conversations, right? Like, so we'll be outside from 11 a.m. to like 8 p.m. talking and hugging people, dapping people up, having some real serious conversations in the midst of like joking and laughing. Like, how do we begin to really socialize? Yo, we got to all start getting ourselves together.
I think honestly, man, we're starting to see it. I know I am, and I don't know if it's because, life kind of brings us to that moment. We're all, 10, 12 years ago, tailgating looked totally different. 12 years ago, our lives looked totally different. A lot of us weren't married, a lot of us didn't have kids, but life kind of brings us to a moment where you have to start having those conversations. You start showing each other pictures of your kids and what you're doing. You talk about daycare, you're talking about schools, and now you're at a point where those conversations about health are normalized. Those conversations about emotional and mental well-being are starting to be normalized. So I'm starting to see it, through platforms like this, through our group chats various group chats you may be in. You're talking about this stuff. You see things happening too. Once you start seeing things, health-wise happening to people who are, close to your age range, the light bulb starts, going off. A recent example was the death of Chadwick Boseman, who is in our age range. And this is someone who is, who was well known. So you start seeing people in their late 30s, early 40s dealing with life issues. You can't avoid those conversations anymore. So I'm starting to see those happen in my social circle, and I hope we can continue to normalize that on a broader scale.
Well, I look at it in kind of like a historical context, and through that trauma-informed lens where you look at African Americans historically and how long slavery was. It wasn't like we volunteered for that. That was put on us and by oppressors, and that impacts us to this day. I mean, there were hundreds of years within this country that we didn't have an option. We didn't have an option what we were eating. We didn't have an option how we took care of ourselves. We didn't have an option of how we cultivated our family and really provided guidance and leadership within our families. We were kind of pushed and used and torn apart. And then, with all that trauma, generations and generations of trauma, the transition was in the segregation, which, you look at other folks that have been done dirty or have been victimized. It's how do we help transition you to normalization? Not the case in the African American communities. It's segregation, separate. Let's keep you separate, and let's keep leaning in and letting you know that you're different and giving you subpar education. And the law is bent against you. And I mean, we have a very small period of time, and we're probably in a generation that from, you grow up in the 80s and 90s where, you get the Michael Jordans, you get the Tiger Woods, you get the folks that make it okay to be Black, that generations before us didn't. And that transition, we're in the infancy of us really being able to educate ourselves and to provide leadership within our communities to propel ourselves to a whole different level. And so to me, in my like vision, I see there's a social deficit that we have, but then there's also an economic deficit. Because you look at hundreds of years where folks have been generating wealth off our backs and generating wealth in their family and passing that on, through their estate and through their inheritance year after year. And a lot of folks like us are first generation college students and college graduates. And so we're starting from zero. When I started, I didn't start with anything but a degree and, just some perseverance and a great support system. So a lot of folks have a head start on us. And so in my mind, we have to start making strategic and intentional investments in our community and in our culture. And so, just like Silas is saying, within your circles, we have to make those investments, but then also going back in the community for folks that don't have those same social supports and what they call developmental assets, we have to start providing leadership and guidance so that we can move our culture forward, because we're at deficits and we got to see the big picture. I don't think we can look at it and say, oh, I'm doing all right. You know what I mean? I got a house, my family's doing okay. I think our vision has to be, how do we go back and invest in others that don't have what we have so that we can get them up to speed?
Yeah, that's tough. Can I just jump in? That's tough sometimes, man. That, to the last point you were saying, Eric, about, we get in our bubble, we get comfortable, and that a lot of us do that. You get our degrees, we get our jobs, we have a house, we're good. And we don't want to do anything or risk anything that will damage what a lot of us have been working so hard to get to. We don't want to, put ourselves out there too much to do those things you're talking about at the risk of destroying what we have worked so hard to get. And that, like you said, that what that looks like, that house, that perfect perception of what success should look like. So I think that's a struggle for a lot of us. How do we, get involved? How do we, make an impact on a community? But at the same time, there's that thought in a lot of people at the back of our heads, I want to do something, but I don't want to put myself too far out there because it may cost me, what I've worked so hard to build and to achieve, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. It makes a lot of sense. And Eric, you talked a little bit about people being in front of us, people, having a head start. Jamar, you talked about us working hard and trying to hold on to what we have, despite the fact that other people have a head start. And what that prompts me to think about is the fact that, Eric, you went to Virginia Tech, Jamar and I went to Hampton. And, even for Jamar and I at a HBCU, from a distance, there's this idea that all Black people are the same, but I met a different kind of Black people when I got to Hampton, right? I came from middle class inner city community, and I began to meet Black people that, whose parents were politicians, hedge fund managers, judges, you name it, right? And it's not until we graduated that I started to see how far ahead some of them were in terms of planning and what was normalized. And so, Eric, I know for you being at VTech, you definitely were exposed to people who were, just living normally with that head start. Like, what were some of the experiences or some of the incidents that you saw that, sounded off a light bulb in your head? Like, man, there's a different world out here.
Yeah, no, the biggest thing that really hit me was, I was a pretty smart individual, so I thought I was like really smart. And once you jump into the pool and I'm looking around, like my freshman year, I'm like, damn, everybody here is smart. It ain't nobody here, like, lollygagging around. Like, they're executing at a whole different level. And that helped me to see, get with it, stay sharp. And I started out in the engineering program. And it was crazy because they had a minority program where we all started like a month ahead of time at school just so we knew each other and could support each other. But within that pool, like, you're right, folks had these families that their dad, runs this multi-million-dollar company, and this is just a part of life. Like, this is just a stage in life. This is just a part of the game. In my mind, this was my come up. Like, I gotta eat. I gotta get this degree. And so within the first the first semester, like, there was 2 classes, this chemistry class that I took AP chemistry. I'm failing the chemistry class, organic chemistry. And so it really was a wake-up call. I had to transition out of engineering into something that was a better fit for me. But my survival instincts kicked in, And I was like, nah, I gotta survive here. These other people, you know, when you come from a lower income background, there's a reality that you know that it ain't sweet. If I go back home, it ain't gonna be sweet. So I've got to really execute. People talking about the 5-year plan and this, that, and the third. In my mind, whenever I heard that, I'm like, are you crazy? Pay another year? Like, I gotta pay this. Like, I'm not paying no extra year. Like, yeah, keep drinking, keep doing what you do. I'm getting this in 4. I'm gonna get 2 majors and I'm out of here so I can make some money. So there was a different type of thinking that I saw, but the consulting firm that I started, King Consulting Development Group, is really about bringing that exposure to college students, especially minority students, around how to cultivate your career and create inroads into the corporate world, because it's a different world to navigate, especially for folks that don't have the parents that are in the corporate world. We just don't have that guidance. And so I saw that need. And so that's what, like I said, it's just about how do I invest in others? How do I push our culture forward? And so we're working with a few HBCUs, but also, traditionally white institutions to support minorities so that they're not at that deficit, because that support is so important.
That's great, man. You actually sound like me, because I started off at Hampton as a biology major. Had these, dreams of, going into the medicine, but then, those organic chemistry classes hit, and it's like, wait, it's a little bit out of I didn't have the range for that. So I did have to find something kind of like you, Eric, more in line with what, what fit my skill set. And fortunately for me, I did. But going back to the original point, Silas, that's one of my biggest pet peeves when people talk about HBCUs. You see these discussions often in social media, and even in your household with family members. The decision not to go to an HBCU. One of them is talked about as, I want to have a diverse experience. And, it just goes to show you that you don't realize how different Black folks are. I mean, like you said, there are Black people from DC, New York, Atlanta, people who are first generation college students, people who are legacy college students, people who were in these gifted programs like, Jack and Jill and others, and those who just got by, by whatever other means we're able to get in college. And, people different type of music, different type of interested, people who are in the arts, people in theater, people in the band, people who, weren't really into extracurricular activities. So there were different, all Black people aren't the same. You have conservative, you have liberal, you have whatever. And so, that's the type of experience you have at a HBCU that brings in that diversity, especially amongst a group of a majority Black people.
Man, listen, I knew that there were different types of Black people just by going to the ATM machine on Fridays, man. My dad, my dad and my mom would call me on Thursday nights, right? And we would go through this routine where, like, I'm 18, 19 years old. I'm really not trying to talk to them that long, but I'm just talking to them, and I'm just waiting for the, do you need some money question from my dad, right? And my dad would send me a couple of dollars, man. And, you go to the ATM, and at that time, security breaches were not in the front of our minds. So people would just throw their receipts next to the ATM machine. And you would see some receipts from people that are in front of you, and their balance is like $20,000, $10,000. And my balance is like $75, right? So you start realizing, man, like, everybody's not from the same background. Yeah. And I'll never forget this girl, man. She and I were just casually talking, and she was balancing her checkbook next to me. And this is no lie. She was balancing $100,000. And I'm looking at her, and I look down at the checkbook, and I'm seeing her kind of writing in there, and I'm like, that's $100,000, right? And I think I'm 20 at the time, and she's 19. And it's like, we're in the same space physically, but we're not in the same space, in terms of our lifestyles. And I think it was at those sorts of moments where I realized, man, people do have different head starts. And as fathers, right, the three of us, obviously our goal is to be better at fatherhood than the previous generations, right? I want to be the dad that my daughter goes to Hampton 18 years from now and she has $100,000 in her checking account, right? But as I think about that, does that make her better? Does it make me a better father? Is it really setting her up for reality? Like how do we navigate this idea of being better without actually spoiling the experience for our kids?
Well, I think we have a responsibility to put our kids in the best situation to be successful, whatever that looks like for each of us individually. And that's, you know, I don't think I think our community has a issue with, sometimes we penalize success. You know, we hold back for putting our kids in the best position to win for the sake of not wanting to appear that we think that we're better than the next man. And I don't think that's the right approach. We should do whatever we can to put our kids in the best position to be successful, whatever that looks like. And we should not feel bad for doing so.
Yeah.
I would say, you know, the biggest, and like my success as an individual and as a businessman is because the mentors I've had who have been multimillionaires to regular millionaires to just like, they make a lot of money. The biggest gift that they gave me was not giving me anything. I mean, they would give me support in a way that helps me move along, but it wasn't like, yo, here's this money, yo, you're good, everything is sweet. So that whole mentality of having to grind and earn it and having grit, there's so much value there. And so, you know, as you bring your kids along, my big thing is, you know, lifelong learning. Like, you're going to learn throughout life. I'm going to teach you about investing. I'm going to teach you about entrepreneurship, but I want you to use your strengths to be successful. And so to do that, I have to structure it in a way where you have what you need and you know where you're going and what direction you're going in, but there's nothing sweet out here. Because in the real world, nobody's giving you anything. Like, especially if you're going to be an entrepreneur or you're going to run your own thing. And that's really where I want my kids' minds to be, is like, I think as Black people, culturally and historically, we've been used. And then after that, we've been told, oh, this is the way to success. And that's why I always tell people, read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, because it's like, look, success isn't just being middle class. To me, I came from being poor, so middle class was rich to me. I mean, having a nice house, being able to eat, and, you know, having a decent car, hey, that's living. And so for me, being content, it doesn't take a lot for me to be content. But, you know, if you want to be successful, and what I see from my mentors, like generational wealth, you really have to continue to be that lifelong learner and grow. Be in growth mode all the time. And that's what I'm a you know, preach to my kids and try to teach that and be an example of that. Is you're always in growth mode. You're always learning, networking, and learning from other people. So I can learn from you guys. You know, when I saw Jamar and I looked at your LinkedIn, I was like, communications, strategic communications. I need to learn about that because, like, I have a growing nonprofit and I need to put together a really strong communication plan. I was like, wow, Silas is really looking out because this is exactly what I need as I grow the brand. And, you know, we have to communicate to our clients as well as, you know, our donors and our stakeholders. And so it's not just one person we're talking to. And there's so many different modes of communication. That was one of the real exciting things when I saw your bio and your strategic communication. I was like, That's spot on.
Yeah, let me just I'm not thinking about push back, but ask a question, Eric, about that. The value of hard work. You can't overstate that. But I think that sometimes a hookup is valuable too. If we are in a situation to bring someone up, or put our friends or family members in a position, like, nepotism is not always a bad thing. And I think sometimes, we want to grind, we want to, do the work, which is great. You have to do the work all the time. But sometimes we should not accept, the hookup, or accept, situation where someone can give us, someone who is in a position to give us a little bit of favoritism, because, to be honest, our white counterparts have been doing that for years, and we have, if we are in a situation to do so, we should not do it in certain situations.
But it's also knowledge of that person and trust too, right? So if someone's looking from a distance, they call it nepotism. But if it's you and I, Jamar, I know your character. I know a lot about you. So yeah, I know you, but I know about you as well, which also plays a factor. And this time, I don't have time to survey everyone's application, everyone's resume. So I've got to make rapid decisions. And I think, to your point, where possible, man, we should give each other opportunities, and we should look in-house, and we should do as much as we can to look out. And I think a big part of that is those who are being looked out for, understanding that they're being looked out for and not taking advantage of that. And I think the trust piece, I had a previous installment of this show where the two guests, we talked about the fact that just having this platform for people to meet each other who need to know each other is a step in the right direction toward trust, right? I mean, Eric, you could have easily ran across Jamar's LinkedIn by accident, right? But you went there with the purpose because you knew you were going to be introduced to him. And now just this small bridge brings you closer to saying, I can consider him for that. So, I mean, that's a part of it.
Yeah, no, it's real. And I mean, to Jamar's point, I never look to look past a competitive advantage. So whenever you can give yourself a competitive advantage, leverage that. I'm not saying that, but I think when people are given certain things to where they don't appreciate what it takes to get to that point, I think they miss a step. And I've seen that time and time again throughout my professional career, where people have accelerated without doing the work, and they don't have the experience to execute. They can't get the job done. I can't trust that you're gonna show up when it's game time. Like I was telling Silas, one-on-one on the corner with no safety help, and you fall apart every time because you didn't put the work in. And so I always go back, I'm a 49er fan, to Jerry Rice and running that hill. He ran that hill, he kept running that hill, and it put him in a position because he did the work. So I'm all about, like, the competitive, giving ourselves competitive advantages, leveraging our networks and working together. But I think we hurt ourselves when we skip steps and don't put the work in, especially on my team. If you're going to be on the team, you got to put the work in. And I think there is value too, though, in communications. You put in the work from college on through your career, ESPN and all these different things. If I ask you questions about communication, I know you know what you're talking about. It's not like I'm talking to a college student. And so there's just a difference there where I can lean in with confidence because you've done the work. You're thorough in what you do.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point, because you know those employees who are young, they've gotten, their resume put to the top of the pile, and once it's crunch time, once it's time to get the job done, they fold. You definitely can see point those out because they stand out like a sore thumb, man. But something you were talking about, Silas, you made me think. It's also, we have to be careful and we have to be mindful of how we treat each other, because you never know who's connected. I could have met Erick completely in a different setting, not knowing the connection to Silas, and he may have had a maybe whatever perception he would have had about me, or vice versa, not knowing that we have a mutual, friend. And the world is so small, not just here in DC, but just in general, it's 2-3 degrees of separation. You might meet someone who may know someone who you went to college with, who may, be a cousin of someone from your hometown or whatever. So you always have to be careful of how you treat each other, because you never know, who is connected and how, your paths may cross down the line. 2-3 years down the line, a name may pop up in a job search or something, and you may, where do I know this name from? And then you may remember a negative interaction you may have had with that person, or a positive interaction with that person. You can reach out to someone and say, hey, what do you know about Erick? He's up for this job that I'm hiring for. And then, that may put him automatically to the top of my search list, because we have a connection there that we weren't aware of beforehand. So it's always important to be mindful of how you treat each other, because you never know who knows each other.
Yeah, very important. And what I've also tried to do, again, why I've always asked people on these installments to send me how they want to be introduced. Because sometimes a lot of us want to be connectors, and we end up introducing people and leading with the wrong thing, right? And I've been on the bad end of that, right? There are people that assume that there are things about me that they should lead with. And it's like, that's not what I want to have you lead with when you introduce me, man. So I think this whole period that we're in right now is going to transform how we network, but it's also going to transform how we view ourselves, right? The things that we truly value are going to rise to the top in this period. I think being a husband, being a father, being a caring friend, those things are far more important than any title that I've ever held. And those are the ways in which I'd rather be introduced versus, a specific title or a specific connection that I have to someone else, right? One of the things that I do in my professional life, I'm often providing advice to people in leadership, right? And, therefore people associate me with those leaders, right? But then at the same time, I have my own individual life that I'm living as well. And I don't mind being associated with those people, because if I did, I wouldn't work with them. But, it's just important that we all be mindful and respectful of people, how they want to be introduced. And that's always been something that has been, near and dear to me, but it's even more near and dear now, because, we're more than titles, we're more than salaries, we're more than, where we're from. And I think that's just important to highlight when we are doing those introductions. So it's my hope that in this new phase of life that we're in, that people are more thoughtful, more considerate. And I think the more thoughtful and considerate we are, the more value we can get out of the interaction. So that's just important to me.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And I think that, and that's why I'm the biggest, the biggest advocate for entrepreneurship, because we all have skills, and we've all been, like, society as a whole, we've been educated and socialized to do things in a way where working for others is, just kind of mainstream, getting a job or career, versus entrepreneurship, where you have the skills, talents, and vision to execute on that, and actually leverage that to the maximum ability, so that the financial windfall comes to you and your family, so that your legacy can be something a little bit different. And so I'm always the biggest advocate of that. Like, each of you guys have skill sets that you've been able to execute over the last 20 years that can be, like, right now, somebody pays you for that expertise. Is their ability to say, well, I'm gonna start my consulting firm on the side, and I'm gonna use this expertise to enrich my family in a different type of way. And so the freedom that comes with that is almost, I tell you, man, from last year when I did it, the freedom is a different life. I almost feel like I was working for this other dude, and I'm looking at his vision, and he's trying to tell me how we're doing things, and I'm spending 40 hours of my week under your vision. Life is too short. I'm like, yo, nah, Ace, I'm gonna do mine, and then we'll see how it all works out. And I think we've got to have faith in ourselves to start to invest in our own ventures, because Jamar, you got the skills. Silas, you got the skills. We just, like I said, I think we've been conditioned to not really look at it that way or have that perspective. But when I look at you, I see something different. Both of you guys, where I'm like, yo, they easily could be running their own shop, like off the rip. And that's what I've been investing in people this whole last year and a half. Anybody that'll hear it, I'm like, yo, we can meet every 2 weeks. Let's talk about it. This transition. And somebody had to do it for me. Like one of my mentors was like, I'm not going to be on your board no more unless you take it to another level. Unless you do this full time, yo, I mean, I'm gonna have to find somebody that's a little bit more serious about what they're doing. And that hit home with me. I was like, yo, you're challenging me, and you're not gonna play me like this. I'm gonna step up. I'm gonna put this plan together. I can handle this. And I was able to do it. And without that challenge, I don't know if I would be here as an entrepreneur and in my own space. So I'm so thankful to him. I thank him every time I see him. I'm like, yo, you literally freed me from this rat race. I can literally do what I want to do and execute on my vision because you pushed me. So I always plant these seeds with folks that had a potential to run their own shop, because I think that's more needed in our community than anywhere else, is to have a confidence in each other and to push each other to do more and be bigger and better in our spaces.
So what would you say, Eric, to someone who was like, I hear what you're saying, it sounds great, but entrepreneurship just ain't for me. I have no desire to do my own thing, to own my own thing. You know, I'm okay with my 9 to 5. I'm okay with, going to work, coming home, and that's it. Because I know, entrepreneurship is, there are pros and cons to it, obviously, with the pros and cons of 9 to 5. But so oftentimes entrepreneurs tend to push that on folks. So what do you say to folks who may just not have that desire to do what you do?
That's fine. We won't be meeting every 2 weeks for me to invest. No, I mean, it's cool. Like whatever vision and whatever purpose is in your life, I don't dictate that. But if you're gonna live, our lives are so short. So if you're gonna live on this earth for a small period of time, you can do it working for somebody else. That is, because everybody's not built and doesn't have the skill set,
right,
and the drive and the grit to do the entrepreneurial game. But if you're a successful professional and you've been doing something for 20 years and you literally have that skill set, well, you're making someone else the money. So you're working for, you're using your skill sets and somebody else is benefiting from it. So as long as you have that awareness and you're comfortable with that, that's cool. Do it. I'm not knocking anybody, but if you have that ability and you have that skill set, I think you can enrich your family in a totally different way, and maximize your potential versus making somebody else rich. Because at the end of the day, you're part of somebody else's team, and I have teams. But as I develop my team, I'm telling them I'm developing you so you can run your own shop, so you can do your own thing, and you wouldn't be on my team if you didn't have what it takes to run your own shop.
Yeah, I think that sometimes when people are planting those seeds, it's one thing if a person is saying that to everyone, but oftentimes when people say things to me, it's my belief that they're saying it to me because they see that in me, and that's not a spill that they're giving to every person they run into. But at the same time, I also think about the fact that for us as men, and we often talk about male ego. I think everyone has ego, right? Women have ego, men have ego, children have ego. We all have egos, right? But specifically with men, it is sometimes hard to hear even compliments or suggestions about potential in ourselves from other people, specifically men, right? And so I think during this period, it is important to encourage each other. Um, and I'm always trying to find the right way to encourage those that I care about. It's funny, I do a walk every day, right? And I did a 5-mile walk this morning, and it's ironic that we're having this conversation because I was thinking about friends of mine that I feel like could be doing a lot more, right? Obviously, I could be doing a lot more, but a couple of friends came to mind just as I was walking and kind of thinking, and I'm struggling with ways to tell them that, right? And some people will just say it, yo, you got to step it up. You could be doing X, Y, and Z, but I'm just not the kind of person that says it that way, right? So it's just ironic that we're having this conversation because it's necessary. We just got to find a way to do it strategically. And, you know, out of the three of us, Jamar is probably the best suited at providing us with insight on, you know, how do we strategically communicate that. But this is a time that I think when we look back, man, there are going to be people that make the best of it and people that make the worst of it. But it is a good thing to know that people see more in you than maybe you see in yourself. But I think when it comes down to it, you have to be the one to execute. And others can say as much as they want to you about what they think you can do. Only you can be the one to really ensure that it happens.
Yeah, going back to one of your, I think your first couple of questions you had, Salas, about what we've been doing during this COVID period. One of the things I've tried to do is be intentional about reaching out to folks, just to check on them. You know, not wanting anything in particular, but just to see how they're doing, because people have been going through it the last 6-7 months since we've been on the quarantine. A lot of people have had mental health issues. A lot of people have been sick. A lot of people have had deaths, COVID-related deaths in their family. A lot of people have lost jobs. And a lot of people are just really struggling to find their way in this new normal. A lot of people who are used to going out all the time and, you know, having those weekly brunch outings and things of that nature have been struggling. So what I've tried to do is just reach out to folks. You know, if they cross our mind, shoot them a text, see how they're doing. You'd be surprised, you know, what that does. That opens up, you know, a line of communication, a conversation with folks just to see where they are. And I think in doing that, that may open the door to some of those questions that you're talking about, some of those conversations that you're talking about. Hey, you know, I was thinking about, you know, this opportunity. What do you think? You know, we have a little bit of a downtime during this period that we're at home. You know, why don't you consider this or work with me on this? So I think, you know, just reaching out to folks, not necessarily with the intention, but opening that door to having conversation with people, that can, you know, be a springboard to a whole other set of a discussion that you may have with them.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. So I know we're coming toward the end of our conversation, but I do want to, you know, before we wrap up, get your thoughts around, as you know, a group of people, as Black people, you know, given all the things that are on our plate right now, personally, as a group of people, what we're dealing with the election, with the pandemic, all these things. What are your thoughts around what the vision for us looks like 5 to 10 years from now? Like, where should we be? Where do you want us to be? How do you want things to look for us? How do we move forward, getting beyond this period that we're in?
Eric, you want? I'll let you go first on that one.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm pushing lifelong learning. As we do we have fatherhood programs. We're in Northern Virginia. We're about to transition to DC. Our classes start in DC October 14th. We're partnered up with Martha's Table and the Covenant House, and we want to maximize the opportunity to invest in others. But it's that whole theme of lifelong learning. I mean, you talk about 5, 10 years. We got HQ2 coming to the area. We got Microsoft. This is going to be a tech hub. I like to, like I said, one of my gifts is vision. And with forward thinking, I look at, what this community is going to look like. It's going to be transformed. You look at Silicon Valley, you look at Seattle, you look at housing, our communities will be pushed to the fringes if we are not prepared, if we don't have the skill set to, um, excel in this environment. We're not going to excel. If we don't have the education, and it's not all about going to college, it's just having those skills in the industries that are in high demand. And so I think I take it as a responsibility on myself as being a leader in community development, is to educate and create a pipeline for our folks to be able to not be spectators in a game, but to be players in a game. And so the only way to do that is to invest in others early on with STEM programs. We're starting in the 5th grade, exposing our kids to STEM careers, STEM activities, what coding is, what robotics is, all the way through middle school and high school. And also with workforce development for adults, doing apprenticeship programs in construction, because there's going to be a lot of construction and building in the area, but skill construction, welding, pipe fitting, where there's upward mobility. I think economic empowerment is so important, but then IT, cyber jobs, cybersecurity is the fastest growing field, and it's at its infancy. How do we invest in our community to where we're exposing folks to the training they need and what they need for the background check so that they can get the security clearance to be in that space? The other, space that they're looking at is the 5G. 5G is about the infancy of that. How do we train people to be 5G technicians and be in that space? And then there's also like additive and advanced manufacturing, where we can get folks trained in that. And so, I'm really big into growing the capacity of my organization to create this pipeline and support our community through creating the infrastructure and support from youth through their teenage years all the way through adult years, so that we're prepared for what's coming in the future. We're not, it hits us just like COVID, it hits us and folks are unprepared. If we know it's coming, preparation that's got to be the highest priority, is getting ready so that our communities we're not moved out and our communities are totally transformed. You look at the gentrification and everything that's going on anyway. We've got to have strategic, intentional investment, and podcasts like yours, Jamar, Silas, this platform, that we got to maximize every tool in our tool box to move the culture forward.
That's great. And I think, just to piggyback on that, what we've seen in the past, even just this year, is the importance of being in positions of power. The importance of having people who look like us, think like us in those decision-making rooms in law enforcement, in politics, business, being in positions where we can have our voices, our issues, our concerns heard, and where we can make those decisions that impact our community. Because the protests and the marches are great, but until we are in those positions of power to make those changes that are needed, nothing is going to change. So we have to, what we have learned, what I've learned, and what I hope other people have learned, is the importance of being in positions of power to make these decisions that affect our communities, that affect our interests. And it may not happen for our generation, but that's one of the things I'm going to be sure to teach, my son and other, kids who are coming up in the next generation, with the importance of being empowered, the importance of, being financially empowered, the importance of being empowered in business and politics, because, though you see all these things that are happening, are a result of other people making decisions that impact our lives. And it's not going to change until, you know, we and other people who look like us and think like us are in those rooms, at those tables, making those decisions and say, hey, this is not right because this is going to affect, you know, my cousin and the people in the hood or in the communities that look like us. So being in a position of power financially, business, politically is what I've taken from this period that we've been in recently.
Yeah, for me, it's been looking at the future and reaffirming that we are enough. And oftentimes we look to other people outside of us. And I think rightfully so, you find sources of inspiration from other places, but internally we are enough. And, you know, one thing that comes to mind, my daughter is in daycare and her class varies in size because there's some kids that come maybe once or twice a week. And they're in a phase where some kids are phasing out. But right now in her class, she's a little black girl and she's in a class with 5 white boys, right? And so, you know, her name is Molly, and we were having this conversation last night. Her name she's named after her maternal great grandmother, right? And it was not a ploy for us to have a name for her that would sound more like a European sort of ethnic name, right? That wasn't the ploy. It was just, we wanted to name her after someone in the family. And so when she was born, people would say, oh, you know, she's got a white name, so she's going to have a better chance of getting a job. And even when people see pictures of her in daycare, they say, oh, you know, she's going to have a better life because she's been exposed to white people earlier. And the thought that came to my mind is that they're going to have a better life because they've been exposed to her earlier, right? So we are enough, and we don't have to go outside of our communities to get inspiration, right? We can find inspiration right within our communities, and that's my hope, is that we leverage that we know it as soon as we can know it, and that we can build on that and move on that, so that 5 to 10 years from now, no matter how much money we have, no matter how many skills we have, the one thing that we'll have is a self-esteem level to know that we are enough and that we have each other. And those are the 2 most important things, man. So that's my vision for it. And I'm glad to hear from the both of you, your respective visions for it. And I think that the more we continue talking about vision and how important that is, man, the more we can move on that. So, man, I really, really appreciate the both of you for giving me some time and giving the viewers some time. This has been a really good conversation, and it's my hope that, you know, you all will cross paths at some point in the future, and that all the folks who come on these installments will have an opportunity to work together, and that we'll continue to build and build and build and have success. So I just want to say again, I appreciate you, Jamar, and appreciate you, Eric, for both being on.
Well, thank you for having me on and having this platform. I think it's excellent. I've seen a couple other installations of this, and I mean, it's a really, really cool concept and very innovative. But I definitely appreciate the invitation. And Jamar, I put my contact information in the chat. I'd love to get your contact, and like I said, glean information and learn from you around some of the fundamentals and of communication from your skill sets, because you definitely, you know, have a lot of skills when I looked at what you do professionally, and I appreciate learning from you. It looks like, you know, you have your little one. I have 2 little ones. I had to come to the office today because I already knew what time it was.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, man.
Guys.
It was great connecting with you, Eric and Silas. You already know what it is, man. Appreciate it. This is a great discussion. And I'll put my number in there too, Eric. So just hit me up anytime. Not hard got to reach. So anytime you want to chop it up, just let me know.
Good stuff, guys. And for those that are watching, again, this is another installment of How Should I Introduce You? I call it my experiment to bring people together. And I hope that this is an inspirational thing for those that are watching, to be able to bring people together in their circles as well. So with that, we'll see you all on the next go round.